For the next 20 minutes or so, I'll be showing you around some aspects of this university business, just to give you some idea of what life as a student is really like. We're taking Edinburgh as our model in this programme, but what we show you will apply to almost all universities and colleges. Let's start at the start, and for most of you that will mean Freshers' Week, the week before first term, which gives you a chance to get to know your new environment. Here's just a few glimpses of what goes on in those 7 hectic days.
Now what happens is quite simple, is both teams start from the middle and go outwards. As soon as someone's finished their half pint, they bang it down and the next person starts drinking.
All the same, you soon realise that it's not all beer and skittles. At some point you'll be wanting to get a degree or diploma, and for that there's a bit of work involved. Quite a lot of work, actually.
This process starts in Freshers' Week itself, when you go to see your Director of Studies. He's the member of staff assigned to you before your arrival who will be supervising your academic career. But he's not as frightening as he sounds.
As between the first 2 years, well, there's not always a great deal of difference.
When they first come in, the main thing is to settle them in their courses. If they come in doing an honours degree, then it's usually the case that 2 of their courses are prescribed for them. And then they have to choose 1 more, usually a free choice. What I do with them basically is to run through the appropriate sections of the calendar and acquaint them with the various possibilities there are among the courses. Once that's done, I enroll them on a form specially provided for the purpose. They take their form off to the matriculation office, collect their grant check. But apart from that, my main concern is to make them feel welcome, make them feel at home, make them feel wanted. And then, believe it or not, I mean, the first question is normally, where's the first lecture? Or where ought they to go for their various tutorials? What's the time of the first lecture? And so on, various details of that kind. There's always a steady trickle of students within the first 2 or 3 weeks who come back because they're not happy in one or other of their courses and they want to get changed, and that's usually possible. The system is quite flexible for them, they can change. The first year students are seen automatically in the second term of their first year. We see them in the January of their first year. But apart from that, a director is normally quite accessible to students. They just have to come and knock on his door. And most directors will tell their students when they come to university that he's their first contact for any problems, academic or personal, that they have. And they only have to come along, knock on his door, and that's it. Some directors have times set aside specially for students to come and see them. Other directors, like myself, will just tell them to turn up and take potluck.
Is the relationship between the civil service and the state, and the consequences that
The university teaching system is based on the lecture. In your first year, you'll have at least 3 lectures a week in each subject. It varies considerably. Size varies a lot too. This lecture is quite big, but in some subjects there can be less than a dozen students per lecture. Lecturing standards are not consistent. Some lectures are entertaining, some can be deathly dull or downright obscure. It doesn't take long to sort out which is which. In practice, no attendance records are kept in most lectures, and it's up to you to decide which ones to attend. But remember, you will be expected to have good knowledge of the overall lecture material. Your note-taking habits might be helped by attending a study skills workshop in Freshers' Week.
Civil service background, the ANAT and people.
Tutorials are something else again. This is where small groups from each class meet to discuss and examine the current topic more closely.
What is the ANAT? And it did.
It's within the tutorial group that the detail of the current topic can be brought out and points of special interest raised. More important yet, it's where you can sort out that the lectures or reading material failed to clarify.
And put forward options that he'll find acceptable, that kind of thing.
But he will. I mean, if he's appointing his own men, then they're going to be helping. So if one guy's, if the agricultural minister...
Tutorials are compulsory, for the very good reason that they're vital to your academic performance. Your tutor will be setting and marking your essays, so he will know where your strengths and weaknesses lie.
Let's say on the CAP.
If you're doing a science, you'll also have some compulsory lab teaching every week. Each lab session is supervised by a lecturer who explains the experiments and helps out if you get into difficulties. In each lab, there will also be some senior students who are paid to help you out, so don't be afraid to pester them if you've got problems. One more thing for science students to remember is that part of your marks each year will be determined by the quality of your lab book reports. Talking of books, the purchase of textbooks is one of a student's biggest headaches. University bookshops will have been told which books to stock, but the system doesn't always work. The thing to remember is not to rush out and buy every title on the reading list. New students often spend far too much money this way, so forget it. The standard procedure is to buy the main text for the course and find the subsidiary articles in the university library. University libraries are well stocked with most of the books and articles you will need, including the more specialized publications. You'll often need to borrow books for an essay or exam. A limited number may be taken out at any one time. For many, the library will be an ideal place to study, quiet, comfortable, and with easy access to all the information. Finally, don't believe all you hear about round-the-clock working. It can be hard going, but it's never slave labour.
Could you tell me, please, how many hours you've got in your timetable every week?
6 hours a day, so that's 30 hours a week.
And how does that break down to lectures and tutorials?
6 lectures a week, 6 hours, and the rest is all lab. and tutorials mixed together. It depends. It's very much an open timetable. And from one week to another it changes.
Do you do much private study? How many hours would you do a week?
It varies. Some weeks if I have an essay to do, I'll work till 12 o'clock at night when I get back 6 hours tonight. And then other weeks I take a rest and don't do anything.
Yeah, probably about 12 to 15 hours a week on top of the classes.
And what's your subject?
It's Computer Science 3.
Do you think you worked very hard at university?
Yes, I think so.
A major worry for all new students is the basic problem of a roof over their heads. This is best dealt with as soon as possible so that you at least have somewhere to call home during term time, somewhere to drag yourself back to when that old library bell rings out late at night. Or last orders, for that matter.
Luckily, there's always someone around who specialises in helping you out in this. Every college or university will have an accommodation service, with staff trained in finding students somewhere decent to stay. So where do students live when they first come to university? We asked the director.
Well, it depends on which university they're going to. I think most British universities now are trying to ensure that as many as possible of the first year students go into some form of university residence. And some universities are guaranteeing a place in residence to first year students. In some cases hedged about with certain conditions about when the application is in, etc. But not all universities can do that. In most cases where they can't put every first year into a hall of residence or a similar sort of situation, the university will be providing some form of lodgings accommodation, which it would normally have inspected and approved to ensure that the standards are right, that the prices are about right, and that the general attitude of the person providing the lodgings is going to be reasonably compatible with actually having students living with them.
On the other hand, what about first years who want to move straight into a flat?
Certainly that's where the main demand lies these days from the majority of students. I don't know that most accommodation officers feel that it's the ideal start for first year students. Living in a flat means that you've got to remember to pay the rent, you've got to do the cleaning, you've got to do the cooking, you've got to remember to pay the electricity bill and the telephone bill and the gas bill. You've got to be reasonably certain that the people you're sharing with are as nice as they seem before you start living with them. And starting coping with that when you've just arrived at university can be a bit of a problem, we think.
Nevertheless, the key to contentment for many students is to live in a flat, usually shared with others.
The capital city of Queensland. That's correct.
I suppose I live in the flat because of the independence of it. It's not like being in halls where you always get the feeling that everything's temporary. Your own flat, you can actually feel at home. You have all the hassles that go along with it, right enough, things like budgeting for electricity and gas and so on, doing your own cooking, but I reckon it's worth it. You can really relax in your own flat. You can stay up till any time at night if you feel like it. You can have friends over for a few days, anything like that. It's quite a decent way of living.
The alternative, and the one taken by most first-year students, is to live in a hall of residence. These can be quite sizable communities of students. This one in Edinburgh is really a village with 1,800 residents. Certainly, living in halls is a good way of combining study with social life, and many find it's ideal for the years they spend as students.
I mean, the thing about being in halls of residence is that there's so little to worry about. I mean, people in flats, now they've got to budget for their food and their heating, and of course there's always the rent to pay. But in halls, you pay your bill for residence at the start of every term, and that's before you've blown your grant cheque. The amount on the bill, now that may seem quite a lot, but you've got to bear in mind that everything's laid on for you in halls. For example, you get your meals, you get your room cleaned every morning, there's unlimited hot baths and showers, and when you want to get down to studying, you can just lock yourself away in your room, and you've got privacy there. Peace and quiet, you hope. That's if you haven't got a neighbour whose stereo is blaring through the wall all the time. And if you do get fed up working, there's always a lot of people around you can go and have a cup of coffee with. So I mean, really, it is a totally free existence. You can come and go when you like. You've got your own set of keys. And if you do find any problems cropping up, there's a warden in every house who can help you.
So it sounds like you pays your money and you takes your choice. All very well as long as you have a choice, but what if you end up with nowhere to go? We asked the accommodation convener of the Students' Representative Council whether they could help.
Yes, most SRCs run an accommodation desk throughout Freshers Week where lists of temporary accommodation is available. This is usually of a youth hostel, YMCA type, but it's quite often needs to be utilised by students, particularly overseas students arriving in the country for the first time. Most problems that are presented are very easily sorted out, usually with a little advice or by directly referring a problem to the SAS or Director of Studies. SRCs are very keen to help out on problems of a welfare nature, but they obviously cannot run housing themselves and can only make recommendations of where to turn. But in most instances, they are able to find temporary accommodation for homeless students.
The accommodation convener is only one of the numerous officials on the Students' Representative Council, which is elected to look after student interests. You may wonder what it's all about. Let's ask the man in charge, the senior president. Well, Ken, what's the Students' Representative Council all about?
Well, the Students' Representative Council, as its name suggests, is a body of representatives elected by the student body to look after the interests and the welfare of the students at the university or college. Within the university itself, it's responsible for putting forward the views of students to the university authorities, to the university administration and the teaching staff. And it's involved in the government making of the university at all levels. On a wide range of issues ranging from teaching standards and facilities to the quality of student accommodation. It's also concerned with liaising with organisations outside the university that's concerned with higher education and student affairs. For example, it has very good links with local members of parliament, with local government and of course with the National Union of Students. It's also involved in the local community. The council's projects enable students to perhaps help the less privileged members of the local community and organises projects to raise funds for charities and so on. It also has very good contact with local schools and it's involved in informing school pupils and prospective students about university education and student life before they arrive. And it also helps new students adapt to the difficult transition from a school to university environment.
Quite a sizable business. But remember that its officials are students like yourself and are directly accountable to you. At this general meeting, for example, the Treasurer was challenged in her decision to switch the suppliers of beer for the Students' Union during a drayman's strike.
First of all, do you realise this is scabbing? Second question is, how much was made, brackets, extra? And thirdly, should this surplus be donated to the relevant trade union? Honourable Treasurer.
Well, as you may well be aware, both Teviot and Student Centre are supplied by Scottish and Newcastle. During the drayman strike, we didn't have any Scottish and Newcastle beer, so we weren't breaking the picket lines by bringing in any Scottish and Newcastle beers, so in that way we weren't scabbing.
The SRC is there to look after student interests, but it's up to you as an individual student to participate.
Turn the volume back up, actually.
Yes, that's true.
Mind, here we go.
One of the best things about being at university is the scope that it gives you social activity. There are so many different people, clubs and societies that it can all get to be quite overwhelming, not to mention expensive.
The focal point for much of a university's social life is the Students' Union, which supplies all sorts of useful services. How would the union president describe it?
Wherever you go to university, there will be a union of some sort. Some of them are others. At Edinburgh, we're lucky to have the biggest in the country, and we provide probably the widest range of facilities in the country as well. One of our most important functions is the provision of day-to-day needs, the sort of things that people have to have all the time. Like food, for example, we provide a lot of cheap food, and it's quite a wide range. It's not like school food at all. We have Italian bistros, pizza bars, salad bars, and so on. And various services. We have showers and baths in the union, televisions and things like this that a lot of people like to use but don't necessarily have wherever they live at the university. These are the sort of things that are found in most unions. But because we're fairly big, we're also able to provide other less essential things, entertainments, for example. We have a regular programme of smaller bands, folk music and discos and things like that. We're also able to occasionally put on nationally known names in the biggest union, TV at Row House. We also have alcohol in the bars. We have 10 bars, which is quite a lot by the standards of most unions, and it sounds like a lot, but we do have a large number of members. Most people, fortunately, are very sensible about using the bars, but I'm happy to say that the surpluses we make on the booze enable us to provide much cheaper food than a lot of places. Outside the unions, a lot of students get involved in various societies. There are about 120 societies at Edinburgh, and they cover as wide a range of topics and interests as you can imagine. It's a very good way to get involved with people who you know share a common interest. A lot of students are very keen on sport, of course, and we have a separate sports union which caters for a very wide range of sporting activities.
Having fun costs money, however, and you have to be careful with your money at university. Here's what the Bank of Scotland told us.
Looking after your finances can sometimes be a bit of a strain, especially when you're living on a fixed budget like a grant. Since your grant is paid by cheque, you'll need to open a bank account. Banks in university areas are very keen to have student customers. If there's one golden rule about student finances, it's that problems are best solved before they develop. In other words, we try to encourage customers to come and see us before any minor financial problem can turn into an embarrassing crisis. Banks can help in all sorts of ways. They're not there just to accept your grant cheque. They are there to be used.
Well, that's been a brief look at this university business, though there are plenty of places to get more detailed information. I hope we've given you some idea of what it's like. If you do decide to come, there are plenty of people to help you through the problems. Good luck.